Welcome to Meet the Experts, a production of the Carpet and FabriCare Institute. I'm your host, Brian O'Halleck. In this episode, we're going to talk about whether you really need a new website, how to keep your marketing plan moving smoothly, and help navigate options when larger changes make sense. We didn't have to go far to find a trustworthy expert and one that knows our industry, as Chauncey Haworth is the man behind Chauncey Haworth Marketing and host the Online Marketing Explained webcasts that are sponsored by the CFI. Welcome, Chauncey.
Hello, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'll apologize in advance for making notes and maybe asking questions out of order. I have noticed a lot of my friends in the industry that have been recommended a new website, have gone ahead and put together a new website. And sometimes I suspect that they're not getting what they paid for, or they didn't really need to make such a dramatic change as to throw out everything and start over with something new. It also seems like some of the professionals are recommending very small websites, maybe 4 pages or less. And I'm going to ask you, I don't understand the reason for that. But anyway, before we get going, I'd want to ask you if there's anything else you'd like the viewers to know about you.
Yeah, sure. I'm a marketing consultant. You know, I use SEO as a spearhead, but most people like me use a service as our marketing service and a spearhead. So SEO is my spearhead, but I also do, advertising and email marketing and website development and a lot of other things, as a lot of people do in my situation when it comes to small and local-based businesses. When you get up into businesses that are nationwide businesses, you tend to have SEOs that are maybe a little more specified in engineering and words and so on and so forth. But when it comes to local businesses, you tend to have someone like me who specializes in local SEO.
And well, that's important too. Is my company found out when Google went to Google Local. Mm-hmm. And Google Local treated everyone as if they were a local pizza place. Mm. So if your work area, your territory was more than 5 miles, you got lost, and then you had to work the Google to be found again.
Right. And that's still somewhat the case. Google's gotten a little better at it with service areas and how large your service area is. But the centroid, which is considered the center of an area, is a big factor in how close you are to it and stuff like that, especially when it comes to walk-in businesses, instead of businesses that go out to you,
Well, I've done a little bit of monkeying with websites myself, and mostly back in the early days of the internet. Today, it seems fairly complicated and shifts a little bit. And the last firm I worked with actually had 9 people on staff that just specialized in SEO. And the owner said, I can't keep track of it anymore. So
right.
I started thinking maybe they were too large a company for us.
Well, it does change quickly. The closest thing here, the biggest change as of late, of course, is AI. And it seems with technology that changes are much more systemic, in the sense that as soon as they happen, they kind of filter out into everything, and everything changes a little bit. But really, the attitudes of marketing in general still remain the same, of concise messaging and being clear and In the end, the ability to communicate with the customer is much more important, and well, carries a lot of weight. Let's put it that way. So there definitely is a lot of traditional marketing still in it, but I understand that it can get confusing when platforms change and an attitude changes and new platforms come in and stuff like that.
Well, is it still a thing to game Google to work with their algorithms and try to figure out how to boost your performance with your website?
Yes and no. I get what you're saying by game Google, because there was definitely a point where gaming Google was a possibility, where late 90s, early 2000s is a very prime example of this, where you couldn't type in anything without getting an adult website returned in your results. You could type in the Vatican. You're looking for the Vatican. You're going to get an adult website, because it was so easily gamed. At this point, gaming Google is not nearly as effective as working with Google, in the sense that you're working with Google tools, you're following Google guidelines, and you're trying to provide the best quality results for your visitors. You're going to get a much better result than if you are going around doing what's called black hat, from like old westerns. The black hat's the bad guy, the white hat's the good guy, and then there's gray hat, which would be the people who are riding the line in between. Black hat and gray hat is not nearly as effective as it was, but the reputation does still continue. Most good SEOs are working with Google, working within Google guidelines in order to provide human results for human visitors.
Okay, so it's sort of like the old rules still apply. You have good content, people come, Google gives you some gravitas points, or somebody clicking in and then staying because they found what they wanted.
So like years ago, we act like it's ancient history, but it's like I've been doing this for 20 years. I jokingly refer to myself as the world's oldest web developer. But 5-10 years ago, doing this was effective, but inevitably there are still human beings, and human beings are still human beings, and there's always going to be people trying to game the system to get ahead. But so 10 years ago, Google would drop what was called an update, and a lot of people would take a hit and get scrambled. And what we learned over the years is those of us that worked with the Google guidelines, every time Google dropped an update, the internet would go scrambling about how they lost all this stuff, but our clients would go up a little bit, and so we found that if we just stay the course and work with Google in order to try to provide a better product, that each time these updates came out, our clients did a little better. And it was quite a sales pitch to have the internet go crazy about how everybody was doing worse, but have your own clients doing better. And you could say, well, this is why it is,
Well, you're not so old. When I first started working with the internet was in the mid 90s.
When I first, yeah. Well, when I first dabbled with it, sure, yeah. But, I would say, let's see, my wife and I had just gotten together. We've been together 23 years now. So about 23 years ago was when I first got my real paying job as a internet guy.
Yeah, well, back then, having a website built was expensive. There were no templates. There were no GoDaddies. It was just pay somebody for their time, or learn HTML yourself, which I don't think any of us really have time to if it's not our business.
Right. That's the biggest issue is, with everything, you're being told you can, and I can learn to fix and repair my car. It's just going to take a lot of time, and I'd rather not.
So you had mentioned AI, and there's a couple of ways to look at AI, whether it's AI maybe being part of the algorithms now. Different Bing or other search engines using AI as part of their process, and using AI for content. So far, maybe I've been fooled by good AI, but all AI content I've seen still seems pretty sketchy.
Right, because you've noticed it as AI content, that's not necessarily to say all the AI content that you haven't noticed hasn't been sketchy,
Yeah, that's true.
The AI, using AI brings a specific thought to mind for each person. So in the case of this context, when you say use AI content, you're imagining that somebody said, I need a great article about carpet cleaning. It spits it out and I post it, So I use AI for content all the time, for marketing content. I also do some things that involve authors and stuff like that. I would never use it for creative content, but for marketing content, I use it all the time. But how do I use it? I use it to help suggest articles to me, at which I use my human brain to make a decision. Then I use it to help outline and write an article for me, at which point I go through it word by word and rewrite it and fix it based on being a human being and knowing what the other end wants to read and know. So using AI is not necessarily bad, but using it to what degree, I guess, is the bad point. There's always a gray area. I know a lot of guys whose websites maybe are built by AI. So the website is generated, somebody types in a search, on the fly it generates the content to reply to that search. It generates an image. I got one friend who's trying to sell pet supplies that way, but I got to tell you, some of the images that it generates on the fly are horrific about pets, so it's like a three-eyed cat, with like some 40-person member family, and you're just all like, I don't know about this. You have to look at it first. I don't trust AI to wing it. I definitely don't trust it for the facts. So like, I could use AI to help me get the idea of what an article should look like. Let's say I'm saying the top 5 stains in carpets and how to get them out. If I type that into AI, it'll give me an article. I can run through it and clean it up with grammar and make sure that it doesn't say, I wanted to go to the store, therefore I walked to the store, and that's how we got to the store, which AI is very redundant in that way. But still, I'm not going to trust that those 5 things that it suggested to do to the 5 best stains are what needs to be done. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes it's right, but you have to research those facts, stuff like that. So, birthdays, it's just not as reliable as one might think. In the context of answering a question, like if I wanted to say, when is Robert De Niro's birthday? It's going to reply to that well. But if I say, hey, I need a whole article about authors and actors and their birthdays, and then it spits something out to me, and in that context it says Robert De Niro's birthday, that becomes very, very much less reliable at that point. So yes, if your marketing person isn't using AI, you are falling behind and probably paying too much for work. But to what degree do they use the AI, and is quality over quantity important to them? That's a big factor.
Sure. I guess I've used it to write articles, and basically as an editor. Mm-hmm. So I'll write the article. It may reformat it so it looks it's cleaner. Mm-hmm. Although I've noticed that often it takes the personality out of whatever you write. Mm-hmm. So your article can come out sort of looking like corporate speak.
Well, here's some advice to you is when I'm doing something like that, let's say somebody else has written something. I have a client where once a month the owner writes something that's going to go on the website or in an email or something like that. And I'll use AI to help me spell and grammar check it. And I will put it into AI and I'll say, I need you to spell and grammar check the following. Don't make any other changes to it. Just spell and grammar check. And give me a list of everything that you did to it so I can double check it. And then I say, and when you're done, make some suggestions as to how I could make the article better. And then it'll list those things out, and I'll read those, and I say, I like those changes, please make them. And then it'll make them, So, a lot of it is in the prompt, Sorry, go ahead. What'd you say?
Who's training who? Are you training your AI, or is it training you?
Well, we're working together in conjunction. A lot of it does scare me because I'm like right here on the cusp. Here we are of this age pre-AI and post-AI, where I have the knowledge to do a bunch of this work, so I can use the AI to help me get it done. It does make me think about future generations, though, where the AI is teaching them and they're teaching the AI at the same time. It does seem like some weird world of telephone. Where you're not sure what you're going to end up with, but I'm sure things will get better, But right now, I think my history of experience is helping me for sure.
Sure, and some of my friends I can hear them in the background going, "It's not AI. Stop calling it that."
Okay, it's machine learning.
Large language model.
It is a large language model, but arguably AI came out to be all exciting and new to everybody, a year or two ago. But, Google, their algorithm has been considered AI, machine learning. There are steps to AI, and AI itself is not entirely definable. So machine learning is one of the parts of AI. So your Spotify suggested playlist has been AI for a couple of years before you even knew it. But it was a rudimentary version of AI where those people would argue that. And it is a large language model. They're right.
Yeah. So it's a tool.
Yeah.
It's not, you don't want to throw it out and just refuse to use it. But you have to have some expectations for where it's trustworthy and where it's not.
Right. In the history of human beings, there has never been an effective invention that we all sat around and decided, well, we should probably just ignore this entirely and never use it. So if you want to be competitive, you have to use it. Yeah.
All right. So now that we've covered that, I wondered about, just in the context of your whole marketing program, the website is kind of the core, and that's mostly what we're going to be talking about. But feel free to go on with something you think is important. There's an awful lot of things your website can do anymore. There's a lot of things that can be automated. And from the old days when it was basically just a 24-hour brochure, to being able to make payments, being able to allow customers to schedule, there's a lot of things that can be either plugged in or written into your site. How do you know when it's time to either update or toss the old site altogether and embark on a new project that'll be maybe more effective or more automated, and really be worth your money?
Yeah, well, there's a couple ways to look at that. When you're dealing with the oldest of websites, you might run into outdated technology. Like we're at PHP 8 point something at this point. So if your website's running on PHP 7 or something like that, you probably should get it updated so that you can run on all the modern browsers, stuff like that. So not everything is retroactive in the sense, so if you, when I first started building websites, I built on something called front page extensions, and this doesn't even exist anymore. I don't even think a website would work with them.
Well, I think that took a special server to run too.
Right.
I think I made a couple of websites in that before.
Right. Right. And so those servers don't exist, and these companies will put out warnings like, I realize front page extensions is a real extreme one, but I'm sure they put out warnings like saying, we're not going to be using these servers after 2 more years. And so you got yourself 2 years to get a new website, so that's one. The other is really money. And it's not making money versus losing money, or at least that clear. A prime example would be using PayPal or setting up merchant services. I use this one a lot because PayPal takes a certain percentage of your money. Merchant services, which is setting something up through your bank in order to take money through your website, takes a flat fee through your bank or a percentage. But let's just say flat fee. It'll make it easier. So let's say merchant services, you pay $200 a month. For one, if you're not making $200 a month on your website, why would you do this? And then, so let's say you say, okay, well, I'm going to use PayPal or Square or something that's going to charge me per transaction. Well, if the money that you're paying per transaction doesn't reach $200 a month, why would you go to merchant services? So a lot of it is those decisions. So to bring it over to a service industry, one example that you brought up was scheduling services. If scheduling services is not something that's really cost effective for you and your clients at this point, and you do have to take into consideration what your clients like, if you have an older clientele, they're not going to want to schedule services on your website. They're going to want to call a human being, So you got to take that into consideration. But if you've gotten to the point where, okay, I need help with scheduling my services, you have the options of hiring people or the options of booking on your site. And it really comes down to money and what your clients want at that point. So updates like that are really based off of business decisions more so than technological ones.
Right. The site builders I've talked to most recently have quoted me things like, well, none of your photos are in 4K and you need some video. And there may be some SEO value to that, but I couldn't see throwing out a web page because it wouldn't support a 4K photo.
That's so you do need diversity of content. So somebody's saying to you, you need some video up here, that'll get you live and active on video sites. At the same time, it'll get you diverse content on your website and people like that. But the need of 4K imagery is a step too far for me. As long as it's clear and clean and people like it and it loads quickly, we're good.
I'm old enough to remember load quickly.
Yeah.
You could see text and waited for the photo to load.
Not to, that's for people gaming the system. Here's a little factoid that's, plug your ears if you're a child, but the adult entertainment industry's overtake of the internet is the reason why the JPEG was invented, was because imagery was slowing the website down so much that they needed a more compressed image format. And thanks to the adult industry, we all use JPEGs today because the internet loads quicker. But we've moved on at this point. We're actually using like WebP and other image formats. But that's how JPEG came along.
Well, is it still true that Google and the other search engines follow Google still have sort of almost a point system for things that are on your website? I've heard photos are a must. Video helps. Does the video have to be hosted on your site, or can it be linked through a provider like YouTube?
Whether or not it's hosted there is irrelevant. Yeah, it's irrelevant. The only part that would make it relevant is a lot of people, when they host video on their site, they maybe don't have the technology set up and the video's not optimized to play quickly for people. So there's a big headache there. But also, like, let's say you had a podcast and you wanted people to pay to see that podcast, you might not use YouTube because there are ways around that. But again, if you're not so popular that people are working their ways around that, it's not cost effective for you to do it. No, diversity of content, better to be everywhere. A buddy of mine, Joe, has many internet business, and he has this concept of marketing called being found, which is basically, the world has changed so much that you need to be where your customers are. So it's not so much that I need to have something on my site as much as it is I need to have on my site what my customers want, and I need to be where they are. So do your customers use email? Well, then you need to have a robust email system. Do your customers, are they active on Facebook? Well, then you need to be on Facebook. The onus, the responsibility falls on the business now, more so than, the old world where the business, I want their services, I either need to call them or go to them. We need to be where they're looking. And unfortunately, there's a lot of different places, but they tend to be pretty industry based.
And a lot of these shift. People started to go away from Facebook and go to Instagram. And now they're kind of the same.
Yeah, well, same owner, Meta.
So and different things come along, and you sort of have to gauge what age group is going to this service, and then think about how long will it be before that age group is your customer.
Right. And that's a big problem with social media. People want to get on TikTok. TikTok's fun, but really ask yourself, how many people on TikTok own carpet? Own it. How many of them own carpet? Not rent it, but own carpet. Not a huge amount.
Yeah. Well, I understand, all the younger generation of my family use WhatsApp. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why, because I haven't investigated it at all. Mm-hmm. But I went to Mexico and found that a lot of businesses don't have phone numbers down there. They use WhatsApp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they run their business that way. I've heard people with smaller businesses, all their marketing goes through Facebook. They don't have a web page. I've got to think there's some limitations to that.
There are, think of, before you said the core, which is not wrong, thinking of your website as the core. But I think maybe a easier way to look at it is to think of it as the hub. So it sort of gives you a place to call home for all your spires, all your spokes to go out, for your machine wheel to go on. Now, something else can be your hub, a Facebook page, a Google business profile. And I've known people who do it, and they do it successfully. And I can't help but to think that they'd be a little more successful if they set up a website and tied it all together.
Well, these days, what does a simple but functional business website cost? I know there's going to be a huge range, but
okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this is definitely a rough one because, man, I see people. I remember somebody trying to sell a Squarespace website for $10,000 per website to build a new website on Squarespace. So this is a third-party service where you don't have access to the code, and where they used a builder and a template. And it's probably 7 pages for $10,000, So, no. building a new website. So let's think a brochure website just to make it easy, which would be, home, about, contact, a couple of service pages, stuff like that. You should be able to get that for $3,000 or less. And that's a really good website so a lot of people say well, then you need to get the SEO or the SEO built in. None of these terms really work, but with the framework of SEO involved, meaning that when they built the website, they put in all the title tags, they did all the keyword research, all the pages are there, the content is there, everything is done and ready to be marketed.
Well, that's something you mentioned. I know some people in the past have used a service of some kind and found out later that they didn't own that website. The service provider owned the website.
Right.
And so they were building for the website owner.
Yeah, I've known many a business that basically would hold their clients hostage by doing that, and I actually worked for a company that they didn't fire me, but I refused to do it. They wanted me to go through and remove the SEO that we had done for somebody when they were leaving as a client, and I said that I didn't feel comfortable, doing that, so I'm not going to do that.
So is the SEO that you've built in one site transferable to a new one?
I probably shouldn't have said it like that. SEO into the site, because SEO is not always in the site. Sometimes it's off the site and so on and so forth. But yes, absolutely. When you build a web page, you have page weight, which is how important your website is for the topic, and then are all the bells and whistles and check marks there that you need to have. And yeah, oh, absolutely. When you build a website, the biggest thing that I see people do to new websites, so they'll say, we need a new website, and then they build a new website, and then they don't redirect any of the old URLs. So let's say your old service page was carpet cleaning in San Jose with IN, carpet cleaning in San Jose. That's your old URL. Then they build a new website and they say, well, SEO says it needs to be carpet cleaning San Jose. Let's remove the stop word, which is in. If they don't redirect that old URL to that new URL, that's real great that they fix that part. But here's 5 years of weight and work that's been put onto this URL that hasn't been redirected. Old links that go to that website, to that old URL, are no longer going to the new one. And there's a whole lot of loss there. And I have dealt with many a client who has dealt with that situation, for sure.
When you're working on a website, you're working with an owner. The owner still needs to have some input. Do people just write you a check and say go to town? Or you got to get photos and some content. And
you do. You do, but you'd be surprised how many people just write you a check and say, go to town. I have 2 clients that I've communicated probably with 4 times over the last 3 years. And, they send me nothing. And so I have to use a lot of stock images and, research their industry. And I do my best job that I can for them, but I could easily see how people would take advantage of people in this situation, people who don't understand. And in fact, he was going to go to another company and let me go, and then I made it clear to him how little he pays me for how much he does, and that he's welcome to do that, but he changed his mind real quickly. Because he has no involvement. The funniest example is website content. Every website I've ever built, the people have said, yes, we'll get you the content, we'll write the content. there has never been a time where they provided the content outside of, earlier I was referencing a specific blog, from the owner that's more of a newsletter thing. They tend to be all right with the newsletters. But, website content, never. They've never provided me anything. But don't get me wrong. I do have other customers who do provide me those images, and they get me updated images on a regular basis, especially like construction style clients and stuff like that who update their galleries on a regular basis. So I have both kinds. Yeah.
In the larger marketing content, then do you handle their social media?
Some. I do have clients that I handle their social media, but again, like I was talking about how SEO is like a spearhead for services, I have some clients that I only run their ads. Some clients that I only do their SEO services. I have no clients where I only do their social media, but I do have clients where I do their social media.
Okay. It seems like if you're doing their social media and you're doing the website, not having any input, not having any information,
yes.
Where do you get information?
Well, the ones that I do their social media, they are involved. They're giving me images and so on and so forth. But where do I get my information? From their competitors a lot of the time. A big part of it is that, if you're a carpet cleaner, and I know what kind of carpet cleaning you do, dry, whatever, then I can pretty much take it from there and look at your competitors. I know what your service is. I go through and I do the work and I do the research and really, my dad gave me a lot of interesting advice in life. And I remember I was young and I got a new job and, I was young and stupid and he's just all, well, are you working real hard? And I'm all, I'm working pretty hard, and he's all, well, are you working harder than the other guy? And I said, yes. And he's all, that's really what counts. And SEO is a lot of that, SEO and marketing is a lot of that, let's look at ads instead of SEO just to, if you're dominating the ad space and your competitors aren't advertising, there's no reason to pump more money into it because you're not competing with anybody. So you're already winning there. You might as well put that money towards SEO, towards a newsletter, towards other aspects. So, so looking at your competitors is a big part of marketing, a big part of SEO.
How would somebody, if they're looking for somebody to take on the marketing website, how do you find a good developer? I mean, you can't do it all.
No, right, of course. Word of mouth, you do have to take some experience, but you do have to take some risks when you hire people to hopefully get the right thing. But word of mouth is normally the case, but you just and also you never know what's important to a person. I had a client who picked me up, came word of mouth. I had great reputation for SEO, and which is what he wanted. But on the side, he had these 2 negative reviews that he wanted gone, but they were on Google. And so we don't have control of getting rid of things on Google, but he swore that they were either a competitor or malicious in some way. And I totally believe him when he says that. So I reached out to Google. I did everything that I possibly could to get these removed while working on his SEO. His SEO was doing better. He was ranking higher. We just could not get these 2 down, and I got fired. That was what was important to him. But, so that's a big factor. But looking at your competitors is a big deal. Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
Oh, no, I was interrupting you. But I always heard that the only way to get rid of those reviews is to bury them. in good reviews.
That's your best bet, and you might as well keep that attitude for your good reviews too. You want to bury those too, because what you want is a lot of good reviews. So that attitude of bury your bad reviews, you might as well have that attitude 24/7.
How do you feel about answering reviews? I've heard some people say you just ignore them and you never engage. I think if you're being social, you need to engage.
Oh, you always.
And sometimes engaging with a complainer turns out great. Not always, but at least it shows other people reading your reviews that you care.
Yeah. My order to my clients is you respond to all reviews. You don't respond to all responses. So if somebody leaves me a negative review and I try to work it out with them and their response is negative, I might ignore it at that point. It's not like I'm just going to go on forever communicating with somebody who's hating on me, But never respond negatively and respond to all reviews, even the good ones. You say, hey, thank you so much for reaching out to us. We appreciate it. We know you're taking time out of your day, and we appreciate that. So, yeah, you respond to all reviews all the time, and you never get mad. And I do have some clients where I respond to their reviews because I can respond to them quicker. But normally the process is that I respond to their good reviews, and if it's a bad review, I pass it to them so that we can work out a response. Because I don't, I'm not going to mitigate their business problems for them. I don't think I'm in the position to do that, but I'll respond to their good reviews, so it's lickety split. They all get taken care of. I get the email for a bad review. I reach out to them. We try to work it out. Normally, they do the responding and communicating at that point. But there are some where they communicate through me to the client because maybe they'll, get upset, and I don't get upset about reviews and negativity and stuff like that. The world's swimming in jerks, and I don't have enough time to get upset for every jerk out there,
Well, and I'm not sure that someone with 2,500 5-star reviews is believable either.
True. True.
And I don't want to go down that track of how a company I've never heard of has an Amazon ranking that's astonishing. Given that they've only sold half of the product that they have reviews for. So,
they're buying reviews.
Yeah.
Offshore.
And I think that's something that was one of the things you were talking about, that a lot of websites went down because they were paying people for reviews. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't too hard to tell. Well,
and if you get busted for that, you'll get what's called a manual action on your website. You can find them in your Google search console. And manual actions are when you basically break the rules of the website. And a human came in, and manual action means manual, like a human reviewed it and said, yeah, this guy's a cheater.
All right. Well, I've got two big questions, broad questions. So feel free to take as much time as you need, and I'll stop butting in.
All right.
Switching to the larger question of the marketing program,
mm-hmm.
What are the basic things that you need that tie together to make your marketing program work? And this is everything to do with marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Getting your word out, increasing your what do I want to say? Increasing your reputation or improving your reputation.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
And lastly, branding. So making that sticking impression of when someone thinks of your company, this is what they think. So anyway, it's a big question.
It is. And I'd probably put it in order so that we can get to it, because everything's important when you get there, but Like I was saying about TikTok earlier, everybody wants to do the fun stuff. You want to do the fun stuff. And branding is one of those things. Branding is a prime example of something that probably should be taken care of later. If you're a business that's already up and running, don't get me wrong. If you're sitting down to start a business and you want to get your logo to get inspired and stuff like that, I get that. But if you're a business that's up and running and saying, okay, we're going to fix our operation, we're starting with branding, that's probably not your best bet. You want to make sure that you have a website. You want to make sure that you have Google Search Console so that you're submitted to the Google search engines. You want to make sure that you have analytics on your website so that you can track that traffic. Because the sooner you have analytics, the sooner you have data. So, a lot of people will say, oh, we're going up and up and up. But, the real valuable analytics end up being the year-over-year metrics, where you can say, how well are we doing compared to, last May? Because we all know that May and June are very different markets for very different businesses. I have a prime example is I have a pest control client that does the entire Bay Area, and what they're marketing for drastically changes from month to month depending on what's been birthed out there. That's going to come to your house. A drought is going to change things. So you want to make sure that you have a website and that you're collecting data and that you're submitted to search engines. And then you want to make sure that you start collecting people's information. Another example that's kind of like branding would be your newsletter. Everybody's just, oh yeah, we're going to start a newsletter next year. And I'm all, well, are you already collecting emails? And they're all, no, we're going to start that next year. And I'm also, you're going to start your newsletter 2 years from now because, for that first, you're going to have like 3 emails, So collecting emails along the way for a newsletter, so even on your contact forms, having an opt-in for your newsletter that you don't even have yet is a great place to start and have at the beginning. So when you have your website built, you want all the framework there for marketing. So there's an SEO baked in aspect that you want. So you're going to have your Google profiles. You're going to have your website with the baked in aspect, your keywords and your content and stuff like that. And then you're going to be building your newsletter. And let's see if I can consolidate this. I'm running off on a bit of a back and forth tangent. So like if you're starting to, let's say we're starting to take our business seriously, whether or not you have a website or you don't have one, but you already have a business up and running or you're getting one started. You definitely need yourself a website. So you would get that started. You need to connect to your Google services with that website. So you get those up and running. You need to start collecting emails for your future newsletter. Now, a lot of people are going to tell you like, newsletter is pointless, man. Nobody uses email anymore, as they're emailing you that. I mean, everybody uses email still, so that's not true at all. And then at that point, you might, by getting an easy way to start getting backlinks is creating your social media profiles. So those are important, but be wary about using them. Pick one that applies to your clientele in the industry of carpet cleaning. I would say probably Facebook, is where you're going to find most of your clientele, and then just use that one. Don't go in thinking that you're going to use every single one of them. Just get started with the ones you're going to use and slowly grow. And then advertising is something that people either do right in the beginning or towards the end, depending on how much money they have. Advertising is great in the beginning because people understand it better in the beginning. In the beginning, a client is worth a certain amount of money for you. So you basically, advertising, we do what's called pay by click. So let's say every time somebody clicks your ad, you pay $5. And let's say you close every 4 of those. So every fourth person who clicks your ad, you get a client. That means that you're paying $20 per client. You get what I'm saying there? So, and it's a lot easier at the beginning, because at the end, the lion's share of your clientele is going to come in through SEO. And that's always been the case. Even before computers existed, the lion's share of your clientele came in through the phone book, more so than referrals. Of course, referrals are better clients, long-lasting clients, so on and so forth. You want to pay attention to those, because there's also the lifespan value of your client, but the lion's share of your clientele is coming in through SEO. So that makes advertising really hard at the end, where people go like, well, I'm getting all these clients and I'm paying you like, $1,000 a month, $800 a month, and that's where 80% of my clients are coming from. Why do I want to spend $20 per client when I'm paying 25 cents per client over here? And that is because they're different markets. When you look at, let's say, the search results, you have your advertising up at the top and your search results below them. Different people are going to click in different places. So you can't put all your clients into one bucket. So when you're fighting in the SEO sphere, you're fighting in the SEO sphere, and when you're fighting in the advertisement sphere, you're fighting for different people. And those people may turn into long-term clients. They might be the ones that get you through a dry spell. There's a lot of reason to do that. So either start that at the beginning or the end, but be aware that you're paying per client at that point, and your margins are much smaller, but it can get you clientele faster. So that's why a lot of people do it at the beginning, because SEO can take a while to build up, for you to compete. But marketing, it's just a matter of money for you to compete. So you can get in there pretty quick if you're just starting out your business, or you need a bump of cash, but it'll cost you. So once you have that established, you're using your one social media that you're comfortable with. You're building your newsletter. You're building your clientele, and so on and so forth. Of course, you're going to start your newsletter at that point, and that is going to extend the value of your clientele. So let's say before they stuck with you for 5 years, and you could count on, for the sake of math, $200 a year from them, so $1,000 a year. But let's say they now become somebody who sticks with you for 8 years and also picks up a new service, and they've now doubled their value for you, in the long run. So at that point, start your newsletter. So now you're doing SEO, you're doing advertising, and you're doing a newsletter, and you're represented on all of Google. You are at that point pretty established. You're doing all the things that you need to do, and it's all about refining what you're doing, or changing with the times, or moving into new markets, adding a new social media platform, adding another advertising platform. Just because you're advertising through Google doesn't mean that you can't advertise through another platform, Facebook, something like that. So I think we're about there. It's not nearly as confusing as people would have it be. It's when we get into the refining that it becomes maybe confusing.
Sure. I think, just like you said, newsletter. I've written a lot of newsletters, and had a lot of that backlash where I'm not seeing any immediate results from this. Is it worth the time? Well, I think they got pretty good reviews, so I thought it was worth the time. But it's good to hear you say that. Are there any rules about newsletters? Do they need to be a certain length? Do they need to include anything?
No. Once again, you're looking at your data, so it depends on what your clientele likes. But, I would make them digestible, of course, 3 to 6 paragraphs, let's say. But of course you watch your open rate, so anybody who's done any sort of level of email marketing, like I used to work for a background company and we'd send out email blasts to millions, literally millions, to the point where you're like hovering over the button and thinking about everything that you've done because you're about to blast this out to 150,000 people in your test run before you even send it out to millions, and it's really scary. But the open rate for that kind of marketing, how many people got your email versus how many opened it, it's like if we got 3%, we were killing it. 3% was killing it. Where my pest control company, who has been established for multiple generations, has close relationships with their clientele, they have a 50% open rate. So 50% of their clientele on their impressive email list of thousands opens their emails. That is absolutely shocking, that they have such a good relationship with their email list that half of them open it every time they send something out.
Well, it indicates that they're not a nuisance.
It indicates
that like they're being
right.
spammed.
Right.
And the information must be worthwhile.
Right. And most of those people signed up. They chose to sign up. I didn't, they didn't grab them from their client list and force them onto there. They had a separate campaign that was running, sign up for our email list, join our email list. So most of those people on that list chose to be there. Where in other cases you're buying a list and so on and so forth. So what you're really looking for is a larger open rate. Unfortunately, like with analytics in your website, you can see how long they spend their time on site and where they left your site. Did they go to your contact page? You can't necessarily see that stuff from inside their email, but you can see if they open stuff and you can see if they click stuff. And if they went to your website, you can see where they went from there. So that open rate is really important. And especially if you see somebody drop off your mailing list that like a client that you can reach out to them, or the next time you're servicing them, say, hey, I noticed you dropped off our mailing list. Can you tell me why? I'm not trying to get you back on there, but I would like to know why, so maybe I can keep some of my other peeps,
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I remember hearing a kind of a basic rule for things like Facebook. And somebody said you want to do, I think it was 6 informative or humorous things that weren't really about your business. They weren't about selling.
Right.
Everything that was just an ad.
Right.
Because if you put up too many ads, people they'll block you. They'll sign out.
And that is really hard to do. It's hard to not advertise. Well, okay, so we're a carpet cleaning company, let's say. So we're going to do one post that says like, give me money, hire me. We're summing it up here. What are your other 6 posts? Maybe you doing some work, a before and after, you being proud of your kid on their soccer team that your business sponsors. It becomes really hard to fill those with these sort of innocuous statements, because you're going to put in a joke. Well, you better make sure that joke is palatable. You're going to put in your political opinion. Well, you should probably rethink of that. But a lot of people don't. You'd be amazed how many people take it to their business page and say anti-Trump this or pro-Trump that, and you're just all like, what are you doing? What does this have to do with carpets? It's like, if it's more important to you that the world has your political opinion than carpets, maybe you're in the wrong business. I mean, That's noble, I guess. But it is really hard to sort of fill that space with innocuous things that keep people interested, that keep people entertained, keep people connected without irritating them.
Yeah. Well, if I was stumped, sometimes I would just go to a photo site, a no royalty photo site.
Sure.
I'd look for a photo that was interesting, and I just post that photo with a caption. And it could be dogs and cats playing together. It could be a frog laying on a lily pad. It was just, there was something interesting,
right?
That maybe I could make a comment that somehow related to keeping your house clean.
Right, and try to spark a conversation, and maybe people would talk about how cute the frog was or something like that. But still, that interaction matters. So absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and for me personally, I tried not to worry about how many responses there were, because there's usually not many.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that's the case too, and people. So if you take all that into consideration, is how historically ineffective social media is for direct marketing. It might be great for branding marketing in the sense of name awareness and stuff like that, and people being connected, I love the animals he posts. He's such a nice man. I want to be sure to hire his company again, so on and so forth. There's not a lot of direct, I found you on Facebook, or I followed the link from Facebook and now connected with you. There's not a lot of that going on with new clients. But with continuing clients, that does matter. And that's why you start on Facebook, and you don't start on something like TikTok, because that's not where your clients are for now.
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the things that I talk to our employees about is the number one important thing. The technical ability is a given. You need that. You need people to like you. Customer needs to like you.
And trust you.
If you post something and people like it, 99 of 100 people aren't going to comment, but they might smile.
Right.
And so it's just about getting people to like you a little bit more, and not just be a corporation.
Yeah, and part of what you were saying there was, this is something else that I reference a lot too, is Stan Lee. I'm a nerd, so I like Stan Lee, the creator of Marvel Comics, or at least a lot of Marvel Comics. And what he always said is, one letter. We're going to treat one letter like it's the voice of 100 readers, because of all those people who didn't write in, this one person did, and they represent the feelings of those who we don't know how they feel. This is the only data metric that we have, and so we're going to utilize it. And this one person who took the effort is equal to 100 people, because they probably have 100 people who agree with them before this person even sent in the message. So when you do get those responses, they are exponential, I think.
Well, I only have one question left for you, because we don't have unlimited time, and
we're right around the time. Yeah,
there's a lot of complications with all of this, if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty. And you do webcast for CFI.
I do.
About all this stuff.
I do.
And those webcasts can be found where?
They can be found on cficonnects.org. And anytime this goes for all CFI websites. I mean, all CFI webinars. Is when they first come out, you can sign up for the CFI mailing list and get access to that webinar for the first week or so after it comes out. But if you want access to the library of webinars that maybe you missed, topics maybe you missed, I do try to make sure that in my case that the topics are, that I'm sure to hit evergreen topics. And evergreen is a marketing term for topics that apply to all time, not necessarily hip news. I'm not in there giving you hip news. I'm in there talking about long-term strategies that will apply to your website for quite some time. But if you become a member of CFI, of course, you have access to all the old webinars, all the new webinars when they come out. But if you're not a member and you're just looking to dip your toe in, well, then you probably are watching this by registering and getting the first week's access.
All right. Well, I sure appreciate you coming on with us. I could do this forever and go through all those topics, but you are already doing that. So
I'm digging deeper into them. I'm definitely digging deeper into them, trying to, make sure that people understand the value, because when something gets confusing or outside of our wheelhouse, it's really easy to dismiss them. And this is something that you probably shouldn't dismiss. I'm not selling my services with this webinar. I am selling the services of all ethical and reliable website marketers, which there are a lot of them out there. And the importance of, if you are basically, if you're not on the field, you aren't competing. So you need to get out there and you need to try. And there's lots of ways to try for little or no money to get started. And I suggest everybody does.
Well, as a marketing expense, you mentioned minimum cost, a couple $1,000s. That's a pretty minimal cost to get started on your overall marketing program. So
it is, if it brings in those people that pay the rent.
Yeah. Well, I sure appreciate you taking your time here, Chauncey, and we'll catch up with you again. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. And if you are interested in me, you can find me at monstersofsearch.com, or you can find me on the CFI website. I am one of the businesses that's registered there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Have a great day.